Howard has a triptych. Well, what do we do with Howard when he goes to Israel for Rosh Hashanah? Okay. I'm going to Skype him. Okay. Yeah. Yesh mi she'omer, holding on Mishna Berura Tefillin Gimel. So we had this difficulty. We said that if you have the cap on the ches, regarding the case of the yud, right, where the aleph, where or the top of the shin is the hairline break. It says that you show it to a child, if he says it looks like a shin or aleph, it's okay. So there you have to show it to the child, right? But yet, when it comes to this, we have the cap of the ches, where it's not touching, but it's not obvious that it's not touching, even though the child may read it as something other than, you could attach it. I mean, so why, when it came to the aleph touching the shank, do you have to ask the child, does it look like an aleph? Does it look like a shin? But when it comes to this situation over here, the cap of the ches, right, even though he may read it as two zayins, you don't have to ask, it's irrelevant. Since it's not obvious, the separation between the cap and the top of the zayin, we go after the way we see it. Although we know factually they're separated. Yesh mi she'omer ach ein kan machlokes or achidush din lehedjo dim hoyo nikol lehedjo harisu efsidi ikutzeroset. It's obvious that it's not attached. Koshis kosaven besif koten chof kufches kufchof mutla bikam dein atir murgel beches chazeh. So he's answering it, Mishna Berura. He says because a child, how does a child normally see a ches? He normally sees a ches where it's horizontal, across the top. This is like a triangle on top. So therefore, he even though it's a ches, he sees it has a tzura of a ches, he sees it as a zayins. Because to him, even when it's attached, it looks like zayins. He says, even if the ches we written properly, with the cap is attached, he still reads as two zayins. Because that's not what he's used to seeing. So it's interesting. So it comes out like this. Let's say you have no child. You have an aleph, and you have no child to show it to. And it's a hairline fracture between the yud and the shank.
But it looks like an aleph.
And to you it looks like an aleph, not a problem. You don't have to call the child. Right? Let's say literally, you have to lift it or take off your glass, look closely to see it. You don't have to ask a child. What do you have to ask a child for? The child is like 100% confirmation that it still retains its tzura os. Okay?
Why?
Because you see that here, because since over here you don't have the option of the child, you don't ask the child. Because the child's going to read it wrongly, because even when it's written correctly, he reads it wrongly.
Why are we asking the child if you know it's like an aleph and it's a hairline fracture, hairline break, whatever, in the letter? I'm still confused. Why are we asking the child?
You don't have to ask the child.
So the only time you have to ask the child is when you don't know what the letter looks like. If you're not sure what it is.
If you're really not sure, but let's say it's literally not noticeable.
What's not noticeable?
The separation is not noticeable unless you put your eye close to the...
Right, so what does the child do with that?
No, there you see, you wouldn't have to ask a child.
And the ches was
No, the ches was saying, even you never ask a child. You don't ask it.
Right, because they see it as two sides.
If you feel it's a ches, and if it's a suffix, it's a suffix.
Right,
You can't rely on a child, he says over there, because the child, even when it's written correctly, fully correctly, he's not going to read it right. So then you go after, let's see you masupik. Then it's a suffix d'oraisa. You can't do anything.
If what?
To Yimasubik, does this look like a ches? is the separation large enough that it no longer looks like a ches?
Right.
That's the question. Yeah.
But if to you it looks like a ches and there's a little break in there, then obviously, why can't we rely on
It may not look like a ches. You know it's a ches. You understand? You know it's a ches, not because it looks like a ches. So the question is it because you know or because it looks? So if you have a child, that's the easy way. Because the child doesn't know it's what it looks like. No, the child goes based on what it looks like. Okay. Moshe's getting excited now. Getting calligraphy into the picture here. Okay, let's see Chavov. Im osios shel shem dvukos. Let's see if Yud Kei Vav Kei. Yud Kei Vav Kei, and the letters are touching one another. Okay? Yochel Afridam, you can separate it. We're speaking where the letters look like the letters. Let's say the leg of a kuf comes down and touches the top of the hay. Right? Since it's a problem, you can separate it. Which, it's not called mechika. You say, but factually, you're scratching off some of the ink from the hay. Right? Because it's attached. Doesn't make a difference.
So you're scratching off the bottom of the coop. Why say that you're scratching?
So where scratch? Let's see you don't make it exactly. So what you have part of it is going to jut up to play it safe. That's only where they be attached when you wrote it. We said before, Mukavil is only a time when you write it. So the only time you could separate it if they became attached when you wrote it. But if it became attached afterwards, he says you're not permitted to separate it. I am Be'er Alocha. What?
It's named Hashem, but you can't always.
So what difference make? It's written, if it's attached when you wrote it, you could separate it. If it happened afterwards, then you can't. It's the same name of Hashem. I am Be'er Alocha. Let's see the Be'er Alocha. All to the bottom. 3 lines from the bottom. Mosi shel Shem, I Mishna Berura shekosav hani mil shenit beku. Noted Yehuda, b'chelek Yoredei Simin, kuf samlates, kmo shekosav shom atam. The Shem halocho ketir sheni shel beisheis loboy mukav gil rak beisaksiva. Yeah. We had an argument before. Remember, there was a machlokes. If you write a kuf all the way down to the bottom of the parchment, it's possible. Right? You have to scratch off a little bit of the kuf. That it should be, because we said that mukav feel is when you write it. So since, as you wrote, it was with one stroke, he went down to the bottom. So there was never a time where the bottom of the letter had unwritten parchment under it. So you scratch it off, correct? And then he says, so seemingly, if you have 2 letters touching one another, and each one retains its form, profile of the letter, seems to be, if it happens afterwards, you don't have to separate them. Correct? So then he cited many who said you have to separate. They differentiate between letters being attached and letters afterwards, if it goes down to the bottom, if it's not mukavil afterwards. He made such a differentiation. If it's not, if the non-mukavil happens afterwards, you don't have to correct it, as long as it looks like the letter. But if letters are attached, even if it happens afterwards, you have to detach it. And he said that was dependent on the second pshat in the Beis Yosef. That's how we explained it earlier. So he's saying over here, you have Yud Kei Vav Kei. So let's say they attached when you wrote Yud Kei Vav Kei. Then that means Yud Kei Vav Kei was never written correctly. Right? Because at the time of the writing, it wasn't Mukav Gevil. Correct? So the letters are touching. What about originally it was a correct Yud Kei Vav Kei? And now something attaches to it. It's questionable whether you have to detach it. We said it's a question. It's only because there's a second teretz in the Beis Yosef who says that touching even afterwards has to be separated. If the halacha is it has to be separated, you separate it. But let's say it doesn't have to be separated. That means you scratch away part of the Shem Hashem. So maybe that's mechikas Hashem. You're not permitted. That's the way he's explaining it. No, the Moshkosra Tam, the Shem Aloch Ekter Shin Shmeishav, the Loboy Mukav View Rak Beisaksiva. When really pushed the Mistabik, Emas Nasa Dibuk, he said, what about the Suffolk? You're not sure when they attached. That it happened when you wrote the Yud K Vav K, or it happened afterwards. Yochel Afido Mitam Svek. You have a Svek. The Shema Nase Beisaksiv. First, it may have happened in Shas Ksiv, it's a problem. Everybody agrees it's a problem. There was never Mukavil. Vim Timslum Nasa Achikach, and even if it happened afterwards, Shema Aloch Keter, it's Al Shal Beis Yosef. Maybe we'll like the first Pshat in the Beis Yosef. That does not be separated. Le'el Sif Tezaid in Nigeh Chiluk. If it's touching, it's not a problem. One second. Va'afilu machmirim b'svek sveko. 1 second. B'isa mechiko yesh lohokel. L'fi mashkos Hashem Rav Yehuda the mochik miktzas os adayin nisha tzuros olav en chai mishum mochik. You hear this? It's in this week's parshas. How do you know you're not permitted to obliterate the name of Hashem? Because it says Sasaken L'Shem Elokechem. You should destroy the idolatry, obliterate it. Then it says Lo Sasaken L'Shem Elokechem. But to your own God you should not do this. So the Gemara says we learn from the Mechikas Hashem. So what about if you have Yud Kei Vav Kei and you scratch off part of the letter? Are you in violation of Mechikas Hashem? If you say, well, after even I remove some zinc, the name remains intact. 1 second. Adayin nisha tzurosel ein chayiv nishum mochik. Rak midrabanan. It's only drabanan. Yeah, it's only drabanan. Akar when it came, so therefore it's a Savi Jarban Lakula. Here it says, they learned that there's no Mechikas Hashem unless you obliterate the whole letter. So if you take off part of the letter, it's not Mechikas Hashem. Still, it's Savi Jarban. They don't want you to tamper with the Shem Hashem, even to scratch off any part of it. But over here, maybe it wasn't written kosher, right? It's not valid because maybe it happened when you wrote it. So what is it? It's a Savi Jarban Lakula. Right? So Suffolk Rabbi Kul says you separate it. The only reason why you're not permitted to scratch off part of the shame is Rabbanan. So am I in violation? It's Rabbanan. Suffolk Rabbi Kul, so you could separate it.
But also, if you don't, and it's makes the whole puzzle. Okay, by scraping off, say, too much or whatever, and making it valid. But if you scrape off a little, and you make it kosher, you're making the whole Torah kosher, you're making many other names of Hashem kosher.
Two separate things. But it may be, but maybe over here it was written correctly. It happened afterwards. It happened afterwards, that means you don't have to separate it. It was written, it's kosher. So if that's the case, when you scratch off part of it, you're doing the wrong thing. That's Mechikas Hashem. So you know, that Mechikas Hashem is rabbinical. That's not a Doraisa. Mechikas Hashem, no, it's rabbinical because the name remains intact. You're only scratching off part of the letter. There's enough letter left that the letter is still there. It still looks like a hay. Looks like a hay.
And kosher is the whole Torah.
It's irrelevant. Kosher is the Torah, not kosher is the Torah. That's not it. That's the objective. But let's say it was written kosher. So there's still a suffix. You may be doing the wrong thing, right? On the side that it was written kosher, it is kosher, but it may not be kosher. Okay, but on the other hand, you may be doing the wrong thing. And if you're doing the wrong thing, you're not permitted to violate a law. There's a negative command, you're not permitted to obliterate the name of Hashem. Says no. The Torah violation, obliteration of Hashem, that's when you erase the letter totally. But if you erase part of the letter and it still could be read Yud Kei Vav Kei, that's only Rabbanan. So I have a question here. Was it written correctly or not? At worst, what am I violating? A rabbinic law. So if there's a question, am I violating a rabbinic law or not? What do we say? Sub Rabbanan L'Kula. Therefore, you could obliterate, you could separate the letters that are touching one another. Right, that's how he's explaining it, based on the note of Yehuda. Correct. No, there's a chance, yes, no. That's a question. There's a question, maybe yes, maybe no. Then you have no right. Then you can't. Then you can fix it. So how do we allow you to separate it? It may have happened afterwards. So that he's saying. So he says, at worst, it's Nisrabanan. Not Yehuda says. The Torah violation, obliterating, is when you obliterate the letter totally. That it's not read any longer as Shem Hashem. But separating or chipping away part of the ink of the letter, that's only Strabonon. He says even those, but he says even those who are machmir by svek, or that's what he says. When it comes to Isser, people are machmir by svek. Right. But here that it's only Strabonon. He's saying according to those, he say there are those who will not rely on it. But I feel the machmirim b'svek sveko b'isa mechika. By isa mechika, not by other things, we're makel by svek sveko. When it comes to obliterate the Shem Hashem, we're machmir. Because that's how serious it is. We don't want to rely on taking any chances with leniencies.
We still have a question of time.
So it's not a problem. Because at worst, what are you doing? In this Drabonon. Am I doing this Drabonon? Am I not doing this Drabonon? It's a suffix. So what do we say? Suf Drabonon L'Kula. So therefore you have a right to separate the letters.
In the case of mezuzah, tefillin, it has to be in order. I thought what you might say is that the reason that if it happens when you're writing the letter, that you can separate is because you're not dealing with the order. But once you go on and then you come back, now you have a problem.
No. It's still because it still retains its identity, its form, its profile of the letter. Let's say a kuf came down and touched the top of the hay. When you wrote the hay, as you formed the top of it, you touched the letter above it. That means that time it was written. That's not a valid writing. But you still could separate it. It's not a problem separating it. In terms, even afterwards. Of course, it still looks like hay. The leg of the kuf is touching the top of the hay. But it's a new question. But yeah. So good, but there's a new problem, because even if you didn't go further, it's mechikas Hashem. Right? And I'm not sure what happened over here. Did it happen afterwards? If it happened when you wrote it, it means it was never written correctly. So then you have a right to separate it. But if it was written correctly and it happened subsequently, that means you have a bone, according to one pshat in the Beis Yosef, there's a valid Shem Hashem. So there's a suffix whether you could really chip away any of that ink. On that he says no. That since the Torah violation of obliterating the name Hashem is when you erase the letter totally. That the letter no longer exists. It's no longer read Yud Kei Vav Kei. But if you chip away part of the ink, that's only Drabanan. So what is my question here? Am I violating the Drabanan? Not violating the Drabanan. So with that we say Saf Drabanan L'Kula. You have a right to deal with it leniently. It may have happened afterwards. If it no, it dripped down. It dripped down.
But that happens while you're writing the letter.
No. While you're writing the letter, it's like one stroke. If it's one stroke, that means it was never written. Let's say you pull the leg of the kuf all the way down to the bottom of the parchment. Right? Although he could have stopped before, but since it's one stroke, that, at the time of the writing, that never had gvil on the bottom of that letter, because it went to the very bottom. So the same thing. If it's one stroke, that means it was never written correctly. But let's say there was a separation, and then the parchment tilted, and because it was very wet, it dripped up. So when he wrote it, it was written correctly. So when did it lose its book of gvil? Afterwards. So there's one shot that lead is touching. If it happens afterwards, it's 100% kosher. Right? It's kosher. So if it's kosher, that means you have no right to chip away of the letter of Yud Kei Vav Kei.
Let's say you wrote the top of the hay, and while you're letting you touched it. Now
there's not a question.
That's not a Shem Hashem.
That's not a valid Shem Hashem. You could obliterate it.
It's still considered that you continue.
Yeah, it's still considered. Considering it is considered.
So, but
Because you could erase it. It's not a problem. You could erase it. Because it has tzuras os. It has the profile of the letter. See, one thing I'm saying it, but what I don't understand, that he says if it was not written correctly, then you could separate it. Was that mechikas Hashem?
Wasn't the name of Hashem?
It is. It is the name of Hashem. It is. Let's say you write Yud Kei Vav Kei on a piece of paper, and as you write it, it touches another letter. on an ordinary piece of paper. Are you permitted to obliterate that name? Right? It has no relevance to tefillin, mezuzah, or anything else. You have no right. But it wasn't written correctly.
But you could separate it.
No, you couldn't separate it.
It's a rabbinic.
Rabbinically, you couldn't. Yeah, I understand that. Even though initially, no, wait a second, I'm explaining something. We're saying that tefillin mezuzah, even being nisa d'oraisa, if at time of the writing, you could separate it. But what about the mechikas Hashem? Factually, if that's called mechikas Hashem, you mechikas Hashem. So what if it's not kosher? It's not kosher with tefillin mezuzah, but factually you're erasing the name of Hashem. Let me explain. Let's say a person, rather than writing, he was supposed to write Yehuda, and he left out the dollar at Yud Kei Vav Kei. Are you permitted to obliterate the Yud Kei Vav Kei because it doesn't belong there? He wrote the wrong word. He should have written a dollar, it should be Yehuda, and he left out dollar and it's Yud Kei Vav Kei. Is he allowed to obliterate? He's not permitted. But the Sefer is not going to be kosher, because Yud Kei Vav Kei doesn't belong here. So wasn't that obliterating the Shem Hashem? Wait a second. Let's talk about Yud Kei Vav Kei.
Then he has to cut the whole thing out.
Yes, but I'm asking, but since the Sefer Torah is not going to be valid because it's not the right word here, obliterate it. What? But over here also. You wrote it at the time of the writing, it wasn't written correctly. And he had no problem even being Nisa the Raisa to chip away part of a letter. Since it wasn't written validly, you have a right to.
But that's not mechikas Hashem. Right. Define mechikas Hashem.
It is. We're saying it is mechikas Hashem.
If you're erasing the letter.
That's he's saying afterwards. Saying that afterwards. But initially when he said it, if we would know factually, even be Nisa the Raisa, you could erase it. You could chip away part of it. Why? Because you're validating the letter. But that's only within the context of tefillin mezuzah, right? It's not kosher for tefillin mezuzah. But is it red Yud Kei Vav Kei? It is red Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's what we're saying. You could separate it. But it's mechikas Hashem. Validating the tefillin mezuzah, how does that allow you to be in violation of mechikas Hashem? The answer is it's not called mechikas Hashem, because it has a purpose. It has a purpose over here. So what about when you write Yud Kei Vav Kei, you're supposed to write Yehuda? Cutting it out. It also has a purpose. I mean, obliterating it. It has a purpose. I don't want to obliterate just to obliterate it because I wrote the wrong word. It should have been Yehuda.
So you're saying allowed to?
You're not allowed. I'm asking what's the difference.
One is total obliteration of the word.
Same idea. Same idea.
No, but you just make a little line between letters to separate it. You're still keeping the
Initially, we're holding, even if obliterating part of the letter is Nisa d'oraisa, we said you're permitted. If I know factually it was not written correctly, initially. Right? So I think this is the difference. This is the difference. When you perfect the Yud Kei Vav Kei, that's not mechikas Hashem. Right? You wrote it, and initially it attached. Not here. No. You're validating Yud Kei Vav Kei. In the case where you should have written Yehuda and you wrote Yud Kei Vav Kei, by removing Yud Kei Vav Kei, it has nothing to do with Yehuda. You're not validating Yud Kei Vav Kei. You're validating the Sefer Torah. Right? Who said you're permitted to obliterate the Shem Hashem to validate the Sefer Torah? Here, the separation is you're validating the Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's the reason why you're permitted. Because the Yud Kei Vav Kei wasn't written correctly.
So in the case of Yehuda,
it is Yud Kei Vav Kei. It is Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's read Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's the reason why we say you're permitted to separate it. But what about mechikas Hashem? The answer is no. That's not called obliteration. The Issa d'oraisa of Lo Saskein L'Shem Elokeichem is don't do to the Shem Hashem what you do to the idolatry. There you're doing to obliterate it. Am I doing it to obliterate? I'm not doing it to obliterate here. I'm doing it to validate it. I'm validating it.
so in the case of Yehuda where
It should have been Yehuda and he left out the Dalet.
So how do you handle that?
No, so you have to cut out the whole name and you put a patch and you write Yehuda on the patch.
The name goes into Shem.
I understand. That's
Put in Shemus the name.
That's only the Yud Kei. Any other name of the
Elokim also. Elokim.
Well, Kim could be Chol.
No, but he wrote it with the Kavanah. It was written Elokim.
Yehuda, when he wrote the Yud Kei Vav Kei Yehuda, he had no kavanah of writing Yud
Doesn't
Kei
make a
Vav
difference.
Kei.
You write Yud Kei Vav Kei on a piece of paper.
Right.
You have Kavanah. The person's practicing this calligraphy. He writes Yud Kei Vav Kei. Is he permitted to obliterate it?
You write to Kim.
It's not permitted. No, he's not permitted. No, of course not. It's not. No. It's not. Elokim normally means Elokim. Unless it's written within the context of Lefnei Elohim Yovel Dvar Shneim.
Yeah, or the,
Right?
Bezdin.
That's Bezdin. But if it's not within Bezdin, it's not. Or Kale. Kale is the name of Hashem. Elohim Acherim? No. Elohim Acherim? No. By what's his name? By Ado, by Lot, right? Al and Dal Nun Yud. There's a question whether it's Chol or whether it's Kodesh over there. Okay. Yeah, definitely. You write Yud Kei Vav Kei on a piece of paper. Is that there's no Mukav Vil? It's not a Shem Hashem. It's not a valid Shem Hashem. It's Shem Hashem, but it's not valid for Tefillin Mezuzah or Sefer Torah. Yeah, there's no other way to understand it. Of course, we're saying we're saying if you know factually it wasn't written correctly initially, there's no question you could separate it. Right? Otherwise, you're not permitted to separate it. If you know factually it was written correctly, it happened afterwards. So that was the question. So you see, it's called Shem Hashem. It's only regarding Tefillin Mezuzah. The answer is one is a perfection in the Shem Hashem. That's not the Yisur Mechika. So if you have it on a piece of paper where you're not perfecting it in halacha, you're not permitted. Okay, let's do a little.